Right then, well, it is past, and I did promise that we would start pretty much on the dot. I can see that there's still a few people joining, but I guess I can do a very quick introduction just to get started. So for everybody that has joined, thank you so much for taking the time today to join us. It's really, really brilliant to have you here. For those of you that haven't met before, my name's Hannah and I'm Head of Training here at PresentPal. And today you're joining us for our webinar titled The New Norm: How has the university experience changed for students with additional needs, and what does the future hold? So before we do get started, I've got some housekeeping really. So we do have closed captioning available. So if you would like to switch that on, there should be an option available in your Zoom toolbar. So you can switch on the live captions that way. Just to avoid any sound interference and distraction, we are asking that all attendees switch off their cameras and just pop themselves on mute just while we have sort of the main discussion. And then we'll open that up at the end for questions. We'll leave sort of 5 minutes or so for questions at the end of the session. So we are hoping that this is an interactive session today, so please do feel free to chat using the chat box that's available. My lovely colleague Abby will be available to respond and answer any questions via the chat box. And as I mentioned, we will be leaving some time at the end in the hope for a bit of discussion and Q&A then as well, so we can open that up at the end of the discussion piece. We are also using the poll feature. If for whatever reason you can't interact with the poll, just pop your answers in the chat and then we can have a look and discuss your answers that way instead. And as I mentioned, this session will be recorded today. So if anybody would like access to that recording post the event or would like to share that with any colleagues, then do let me know and we can share that file with you and you'll have access to that after today as well. So let's take a look at what we've got planned for today's session then. So in a moment, I am going to introduce you to our three wonderful speakers, and I'm very excited today because we have three completely different perspectives. We've got an assessor, we've got a trainer, and we have a brilliant student as well joining us. So really excited for that chat. And as you probably saw from the webinar description, navigating through the last 12 months has been rather challenging for us all, but in particular students with additional support needs. And it's been that transition from on campus to a remote world. And with that, it's presented a range of new barriers to learning and has highlighted the impact that technology can have on a student learning experience. So today with the speakers, we will be discussing some of the biggest changes over the last year and what aspects of university life have been compromised or enhanced. And we'll also then be looking forward to discuss what the new normal may look like for DSA, but also for students with additional support needs. So again, just as an introduction for those of you that have just joined, my name's Hannah. I'm Head of Training here at PresentPal, and I'll be the host for today's webinar. And we've got three brilliant speakers that are joining us. So I'm going to invite them into the chat now and they'll be able to introduce themselves very quickly. So I will perhaps hand over to Dylan first of all.
Yep. Hi, I'm Dylan Griffiths. I'm the Centre Manager at Bangor Access Centre. I'm mainly working doing needs assessments and making recommendations for students. However, my history is I have done pretty much almost every single type of DSA support there is in throughout the DSA. But yeah, I'm now focused mainly on assessor, but I know about all the other background information and everything needed.
Brilliant, thank you. And Leah, do you want to go next?
Yes, my name is Leah Russell and I am a freelance trainer and mentor and have been since 2010. So my perspective would be from the freelance trainer's perspective and basically working one-to-one with students and providing support. And I've worked in the area for quite a while now, so I've been able to gain a lot of knowledge and expertise in that area.
Brilliant, wonderful, thank you very much. And last but by sure not the least at all, Rebecca, do you want to give yourself a little introduction?
Yeah, so I'm a student. I'm a psychology graduate from Ulster University and I'm currently studying a master's in applied psychology, mental health and psychological therapy. So I guess my point of view is just from the students and what it's like trying to complete a master's in the middle of a pandemic, all from home, which is good fun.
Brilliant. No, absolutely. Well, welcome to you all, and thank you so much for taking the time to join us and share your input, because it is brilliant, as I said, to have the perspective of three completely different sort of individuals that all have experienced that same sort of process and well, industry and education. So we will start then and move on to sort of our main discussion piece. And as we've all just mentioned there, we are looking at the last 12 months and really what the impacts have been on university life and education as a whole. So the first topic that I'm wanting to focus on today is really looking at the bigger picture, I guess. So what have been the biggest changes in your experience over the last 12 months? And as I mentioned, it'd be great to have our audience as well share their thoughts. So please do pop your thoughts into the chat box and any questions or sort of discussion you have, and Abby will be able to respond that way as well. So perhaps it'd be good to look from, first of all, the point of view of a student, because that is ultimately what we're all here to sort of support. So Rebecca, from your point of view, what have been the biggest changes over the last 12 months for you?
So I'm now living back at home with my family, because whenever I was doing my undergrad, I moved up to Portstewart and I lived there for the entire time. So now it's getting used to being at home constantly and having to try and find a work-life balance, when it's really difficult. When I know for me, there's kind of one room that I normally spend most of my time in, but it's also the quietest room in the house. So now I'm kind of doing my work there and I'm relaxing there and I'm doing all that kinds of things. And I think as well, like it is very isolating. I think is one of the things, is because I've moved on to a completely new course. I know some of the people that are on it because they've come from my undergrad, but a lot of them are from all kinds of different universities, and it's very hard to make friends or make connections with people when all you see is their name across the screen most of the time. It's quite difficult, and it can be quite challenging and lonely at times, I think.
Yeah, no, I bet. And I think that's something that's been a real focus over the last 12 years, is sort of mental health and well-being, and just trying to tackle that loneliness and isolation a lot of the time as well. So no, thank you for that. And I guess if we're moving through the process from a DSA point of view, Dylan, from your point of view, I guess from an assessment centre, what have you seen or experienced as the biggest changes that you've seen over the last 12 months?
I can pretty much reflect on the same as what Rebecca said about students having to find a work-life balance, and it's also for, say, the staff side doing the same thing and trying to find times where it's convenient for both staff and student to support each other. Often, from my own experience, we've seen that the support systems generally are the only times where students see people compared to, as you say, like the course colleagues. So sometimes we are providing more support than what we would normally do if we were face to face.
Yeah, absolutely. And from a communication point of view with peers in an assessment centre, what have you found that's changed there? Have you had to adapt quite a lot with communication across?
The most difficult thing has been just bouncing ideas off somebody, where before you can just pop to someone's office, are you free for a couple of minutes? I want to bounce these ideas off you. And now it's more of, have you got some time I can book in with you so I can do that? And by then, sometimes some of your ideas have gone.
Yeah. And
putting something in a chat is useful, but it's not as quick or as efficient as speech. Yeah,
no, absolutely. So Leah, again, sort of same question then for you from an AT trainer and mentor point of view. What have you seen as some of the biggest changes?
Probably there's 3 points I've kind of thought and mentioned would be the transition from face-to-face then to training online, and getting to grips with different software, you know, from Microsoft Teams to Zoom. So getting yourself familiarized with that. I had a bit of experience before this anyway, online, but now even more so. So just being able to train yourself with the help and support of other companies as well, to ensure that you're providing the best support that you can. Which probably leads into my next point, would be instruction, and how important communication, which has obviously been mentioned before, becomes when you instruct online, and ensuring that what you're saying is really clear, so that the student understands exactly what it is that you're maybe trying to get them to do. So given really short and clear instruction, especially with training in technology, you know, whether you tell them going to the left a bit more, it's so important that you can give really clear instruction. And then probably becoming as well, I've noticed you become more than just the trainer. There's other roles come into it, because maybe you're the only person that they've been in touch with, you know, over a lengthy period of time. They maybe haven't had peers or been able to contact lecturers. So, you know, it can become more than one role, and you have to then obviously verbally signpost to other sources. But you do find that, you know, that they will disclose information maybe that they may not have previously, because they're online and it has been isolating. So
yeah, no, absolutely. And I think we've got some sort of terms that are listed on screen here, and I think the one that stands out to me is that one on the right. You're on mute, because I think at the beginning of most meetings now, when we start online, it tends to be either can you see me or can you hear me, and that does sort of change the way you feel about the whole session then, because it's straight away you're sort of having those technical things that you have to think about before you even get started with the session. So yeah, no, that's really interesting. And that leads on to our next sort of main point around what's changed in terms of oral communication, interaction in the classroom or with peers. And I guess we can go back to you there, Leah, just to expand on your last point there, because it is so difficult to know what sort of, whether you've got through to the student, and whether sort of what you're running through, it's, I imagine, very different to sitting next to them and working through the steps together. What have you found that's really sort of changed there, or how have you adapted to the way the last 12 months has sort of worked out in that sense?
I think probably, again, ensuring that they've understood what it is that you have said, and lots of clarification to ensure that, you know, if I have a digital voice recorder in front of me and I'm actually able to kind of show them on the screen, does your screen look like this? And just ensuring that there's lots of, there's lots of communication. Does that make sense? Do you understand? Is that clear? Do you know what I mean whenever I say this and I can't sort of show you exactly, you know, face to face? So I probably increased oral communication and more detailed as well, I would say. Yeah.
No, absolutely. And Dylan, to you, in the sense of sort of meeting with students, so both from those meetings with students, communicating with students, but I guess it was probably very difficult at the beginning, not knowing how hard students would find this last 12 months and how different the university experience would have been for them. How did you manage that, and what are your thoughts on sort of how that all went?
It was quite difficult at the beginning, where it is kind of linked to the trainer as well, as where it's making sure they understand. So when you had face-to-face, you can read body language and you can tell if there's a blank face, where you can tell, okay, they're not understanding this. But sometimes when there is no camera on, you have no information whatsoever. So having to make sure to ensure they do understand that, and even having to repeat things multiple times just to, or even repeat it in different ways, just to ensure they have got everything and we have communicated effectively. Still, there's no way of knowing whether things have gone over completely, but we can only try our best in that sense.
No, absolutely. And Rebecca, I think the interesting, we've had a few chats before today's session, and one of the big things that sort of stands out is the huge difference moving from a sort of face-to-face in-person classroom to a remote teaching style. How has that been? How have you found that, and sort of what has impacted there with teaching?
I think there's kind of like two sides to it for me. Like, for some ways, like working from home and being at home all the time, it kind of, in a way, is a relief for me, because I struggle with anxiety. So sometimes actually being in a lecture theatre was really difficult for me. It was really overwhelming, because I hate the feeling of being trapped. And I always struggle with that within a lecture theatre. But you had, your breaks felt longer. You know, you would go out to the canteen, you would like go talk to people, and when you were meeting people, you're meeting them face to face, you're getting to know them and stuff. Where now you're from home, and in some aspects it's good because, you know, I can, you know, wear at home workwear, so I can be in comfy pajamas or in slippers, and it's good fun, and I can feel more relaxed in the way that I don't have anybody around me, so I'm not worrying about that kind of thing. But like trying to communicate with people when you're meeting for the very first time just on a screen is so difficult, because I know my first week at my master's was like a skills box. We had to do loads of role play. So I've never met these people before, and I'm having to act out these different role plays of different scenes. And because it's a psychology degree, some of them are quite difficult. So I'm having to act out things in people struggling with depression or addiction. And it's so difficult whenever you've not met them and stuff. And then even things like breakout rooms, they're kind of a big technique a lot of lecturers use, and they don't really work, because a lot of people, as soon as they see, or as soon as they hear, I'm going to put you in a breakout room to discuss assignment, all you see come across the screen is 10 different names have left, or people just put their screen on, they don't turn the camera on, they don't turn their mic on, and they just don't talk. So you're kind of sitting and you're losing out on that time. Whereas if you were actually in a lecture theatre, you would just turn to the person next to you, would have a really good conversation about it, you would, you know, talk about things. Whereas I think it's a lot harder to do. And then even silly things like Wi-Fi connections and stuff, I find like you're constantly talking over each other because somebody's Wi-Fi connection is slower than the other, and it means that it's just so much harder to get anything done, and you are having to repeat yourself like 10 different times just to try and get something across. And then I think as well as the aspect that, you know, all our lectures are recorded, so sometimes it is very nerve-wracking and scary to like speak. You know, you'll write, a lot of students will just type, and I myself, I'll just type into the chat box rather than talk. There's been a handful of times where I spoke and I've really had to like push myself to do it. It's quite scary, where I don't think you have that whenever you're, you know, sitting in a lecture theatre.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that point that you raised around sort of the group interaction, I guess, in classroom, and how different that is now in breakout rooms with everybody leaving perhaps, or just using a chat box. How does that make you feel in terms of when you move back into the face-to-face world? Do you feel that you'll be more sort of anxious going into the normal world again?
Yeah, I think this is something I have been thinking about, because I do currently work part-time in ASA, so I am out and around people quite a lot. But I guess for me, because I'm sitting at the checkout, I'm in like my little box. So have been thinking about like, what's it going to be like when places are allowed to be crowded again and there's going to be loads of people around. And I am quite nervous about how I'm going to react to that, because I am somebody, like, if I do avoid things quite a lot. It's a big negative coping mechanism for me. I will avoid things to try and make myself feel better. So I'm worried that I'll retreat more into my house, because that's where I've just been for the past 12 months, because it's where everyone's been. So I am kind of nervous. What's it going to be like, you know, whenever I've graduated and looking for a job and I'm having to actually go into the world of work and actually physically, and not just being behind a computer screen. I am quite anxious about what that's going to be like.
Absolutely. You know, I can imagine. I think that's probably similar for everyone really involved. Moving back into normal, whatever that is, in the transition back will be really tough. So we'll move on then to the next question in follow-up to that, and they all sort of link in. So in moving to a remote world, what has been compromised and what has been enhanced? And what I have actually got is a poll, which I'm going to launch for everyone now. So hopefully you'll be able to see that. But the question is, do you prefer meeting students in person or remotely? So if everybody could just take a moment to quickly respond to that, and we'll share some of those results as well, because it'll be interesting to see over the last 12 months. I imagine people's opinions of this have changed quite a lot. It may be that initially, when we all went into lockdown that first time, that people were very against it, but it might be that now, actually having experienced it for a long time, it's very different. So it looks like we've got a lot of responses, so I'll share those results. So hopefully you can see that. So we've got the majority saying a bit of both. So a bit of a hybrid, I guess, going forward would be great for that. And then the second winner there is in person, and remote being last, I guess, if you were thinking about that, which is interesting. So I'll stop sharing that now. And we'll open that perhaps up to you, Dylan, just to look at sort of what you feel has been compromised in the last 12 months and moving to a remote world, and perhaps what has been enhanced as well, so looking at the positive side of things.
The compromising, I think, just, well, from a meeting other people issue. So whether it's from going on to conferences, or if it's the students meeting up, as Rebecca said, about like study groups and so on, having that meeting up and meeting with different people is a lot more beneficial, so that we've lost that in that sense. But on the other side, I think it's mentioned in the very first slide about the travel, and traveling has been great, because not having to travel has been useful, especially because where I live and working, the next nearest university, if you want to say that, is an hour and a half away, and everything else is even further. So not having to do all those travel journeys has saved so much time. But the compromise for that, I'd say, is when you have meetings, they are now back to back, because you don't have a couple of minutes to go from one building to another.
Absolutely. And do you feel that students, how do you feel that students have taken to the online world? Do you feel that they have liked meeting remotely?
From what the students have told me, there's been a bit of an issue with sort of what they call it, Zoom fatigue, don't they? Where if they have got a lecture 9 till 10, one from 10 till 11, it's a case of you click off one and on another. There's no real break, so they're losing their breaks, but the time is more efficient for learning in that sense. But there's a work-life balance which has been blurred. But the enhance of that, yeah, if there have been students where they have been clear that they would be too ill to go in, but not ill enough to study for whatever reason, whether that's health, mental health, or otherwise. And the enhancement is they can still be at the lecture even if they're not well enough to leave the house.
Yeah, definitely. And Leah, over to you with the same sort of question. Do you think that this is something that you will continue to do and work remotely as well as in person moving forward?
Definitely. I think things will change, and I think that possibly, students may be offered, to the choice, in the future. I do think that there are benefits to it, and it can definitely work. And I find, both sort of advantages and disadvantages in terms of what it's enhanced. I've upskilled with my technology, and I would say students most definitely have too. And I think it sort of shows how mentors should be kind of going, what way we should be going, which is all of us the ability to be able to provide face-to-face and online. It's also upskilled in my communication, because I've had to be even more specific in what I'm saying and clarification. I think in terms of compromise, I think having that interaction with the students face-to-face, and also colleagues, if you're whatever project you're doing, or you're in a situation, an environmental or a educational situation, you have other people to chat to about your experiences and how things are. And I definitely find that challenging, and that was compromised, just to have that. So
yeah, no, definitely.
I do think it's definitely a great thing to be able to provide both face-to-face and online. And the way things are just within society, it's more and more online, and just ensuring that the needs of the students are met. And if they want online, then we should be able to provide that.
Yeah, definitely. And it's been a great, as you say, sort of learning curve for us to get to grips with being able to provide the same sort of training and support online throughout the last year, to know that we can offer that moving forward as a bit of a hybrid. So Rebecca, I mean, something you touched on earlier, and I've been reading a lot of articles recently on sort of how has the remote world impacted, or what has impacted students or been compromised, enhanced. Mental health and well-being is a big one. So I know I can just hear some interference. I'll just see whether it's on my end. But mental health and well-being has certainly been a big thing. that's been impacted for a lot of individuals, but also just communication skills and feeling confident in front of the classroom. How do you find that sort of element of your university experience in that?
I think like what's been compromised, I think definitely for me, is having to be online all day at a lecture and then having assignments to do. And you almost feel like I can't take a break because I have so much to do, but like, you're so exhausted. Like I find that being online all day, I'm far more tired than if I was actually in person in the lecture theatre, because it's just you're constantly sitting at a screen all day. And I feel like, I found sometimes I'm sitting trying to do work and I'm like having to like physically keep moving and keep rocking myself to keep awake because I've got too much to do. And I feel like the biggest thing as well is that I'm constantly thinking about the next thing that needs done, because like throughout my final year, like I lived in the library. Like I knew all the great spots throughout the university to be. Like I knew all the places that what days you should be in what part of the university and which part was the warmest, and even got to know like the night guards a bit too well because I was there so late some nights. So having to be entirely at home and having to kind of try and keep that same discipline of I need to keep doing work, but then not being able to relax because whenever I was finished from the library, I would come home, I would have my dinner, and that was it. That was uni done for today. I got to close the books, I got to relax and do something fun. Where now I'm constantly thinking, okay, well, I have 2,000 words due in this date, so I need to write this many words today to get it done for this time, but I also need to take into account research time. But what if there's noise that day at home, or what if my Wi-Fi connection's not good? And those are the kind of things that are stressful, and sometimes as well, it does feel like the university life is invading into your home life and into your home space. Because I feel like sometimes as well, like my lectures have been phenomenal this year. Like I don't think they could do anything more to make things easier for us if they tried. They've been so brilliant. Even with any feedback we've given, they've changed things right away. But at the same time, because nobody's physically going anywhere, sometimes I think they run on longer than they would if they were in a lecture theatre, because there's always another lecturer standing outside the door wanting the room, where sometimes now the sessions go on maybe half an hour more than they're supposed to, and you have another meeting or another lecture straight after, so you're not getting your break, you're not getting your time to relax. But then at the same time, things that have been enhanced, and it's actually something that I spoke to Leah about, was the fact that I can access support from home if I'm having a really rubbish day and I just can't face being around people. I know I just have to log on to the computer and I'm not losing that time, and it could, it can make the world of difference. It could really change my day around, because I can go from being really frazzled and the assignments are seeming too much, and I can speak to Leah and I'm like, oh, actually that was nothing to be worried about. Like this is how we solve the problem. It's fine. So that's been so amazing, and it's definitely like helped my communication skills, because like I would have never have spoke in front of a lecture or even done anything like this in person or before this. Like not a hope. I would have died off, but I was able to do this. And even when Leah mentioned doing this, my immediate reaction wasn't no way. I was like, oh, maybe this could be something interesting, which is not like me and not something I would have been able to do in person.
Amazing. Well, that's brilliant. And the fact that technology or the fact that we've all moved towards technology has actually supported in building your confidence to do that is amazing. So that's really great. Well, we've got another couple of things just to very quickly discuss. I know we're short on time today. But one of the questions I did want to quickly cover before we sort of look forward to the post-COVID and whatever normal will look like after that is the role of technology. So what role does technology play in the current environment? And again, for our audience, if you could pop in your thoughts into the chat, it'd be great to hear from you. But Leah, I know something that we've spoken about on previous chats is around sort of demonstrating to students. So I guess we would all be lost without technology, but how have you found the last 12 months and what role has technology played when it comes to sort of training students?
I think without it, we wouldn't have got through the last 12 months, so I really appreciate from a technology perspective that it has really helped in ways to another way of communicating with students that we obviously aren't as used to as normal, but has worked really well. And I personally think that it's been really positive and helped as well for you know, outside of from just and educational settings in general, and realizing that this is a really, you know, important area to look at, and if it's something that the student is really keen on doing and following, that we should be able to provide that. So it really has. Without technology, we wouldn't have been able to provide the support in the last year, so therefore we wouldn't have been working. So I think it's been really positive for me. Yes, there's obviously the sides of it that, you know, a lot of hours on a screen, your eyes can get sore, you know, etc. But without it, we wouldn't have been able to provide the support. It just wouldn't have happened. And I think it was essential for us to be here within the last year for all the students that, you know, that we have worked with in whatever company, or whether it's assessments, whatever it is, we have been able to do that via technology. And I think that's brilliant. That's incredible. And that's something that really needs to be taken into consideration moving into the future.
Definitely. And Dylan, from your point of view, sort of how do you feel that your assessment centre and the role that technology has had over the last 12 months, how do you think that will change sort of the way of your working moving forward?
Well, anything that's where we can do a screen share has been a godsend.
Yes.
And I'd say that was a lot easier than when we were face to face, because it'd be a case of having to go into an office. Can you bring your laptop with you or whatever? Now doing a screen share, just what's the issue? Can you show me? And it's there. That has been really useful. And we started going paperless just before pandemic was even heard of, and this has accelerated it. But being paperless, because everybody's in different locations, technology has really helped us to do that. And I don't think we'll ever go back to having paper once we go back, whenever that may be.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, I know we're short on time, so I'm just going to get through to sort of the final question here or topic, and that's sort of looking forward. So how will education adapt post-COVID, which I think is a really interesting one, because we've probably all, as I mentioned, had very different thoughts over the last 12 months, probably changed our opinions of how remote working or technology is used through sort of university life from the beginning of lockdown to now. But over to you, Rebecca, to start off with. What would you like to see, and what would you like to be sort of changes made in the future, or what would you like to be kept the same post-COVID and back to normality?
I think the biggest thing that I would love to see is that lecturers continue to record their lectures and stuff, because even though, like, as a student with additional needs, I do have my own personal recorder. I have a live scribe pen and I love it, but it is a piece of equipment you have to remember to bring with you all the time. And I know for a long time as well, I was quite embarrassed bringing it. I didn't want other people looking at me to be like, what is that? So I think everyone being able to access this is so important and so vital, because you never know what's happening in someone's day-to-day life. Like, even from things like, there is mature students within my course and they have kids, and they might need to take a day off uni because their kid is homesick, or they have care responsibilities, or maybe they're having a bad mental health day. But that means if their lectures are recorded, they can access it later and they're not losing any time, and they're not at any kind of disadvantage. And then again, as I mentioned, being able to access support online is vital. And I think it's the way things are changing, because even in my own course, the big shift is in the field of mental health is moving things online, having assessments and stuff online. So even though it's been a struggle to get used to it, it's been a great training opportunity for me, being able to learn how to, like, give eye contact online, and, you know, body movement and facial expressions, and how important that is. So, like, it's been good as well. So I think there's definitely things that need to be kept, and hopefully they will be.
Oh, just noticed on mute then. No, absolutely, that's really great, and thank you for that. I guess the same question over to Leah and Dylan as well. I guess, Leah, do you want to sort of sort of share your thoughts on what you would like to see and what you think will happen post-COVID?
I think just that students are given the opportunity to choose if they want to go online. or it's face-to-face, whichever suits their needs. And that, yeah, I think that's the way it should be, that they have the choice and they're given that opportunity. And then that we have access, I suppose, as trainers and mentors to as much training as we can too, which is great with all the different companies that provide the software. They're really, really supportive in terms of you can contact them and then you can get training one-to-one and they can help with that. So it kind of all works hand in hand as part of like a kind of a multidisciplinary team, I guess. So it's great. It's really positive. And I think we as mentors, you should have that ability and those skills to provide that specific support.
Absolutely. And Dylan, for yourself?
Ideally, I would say every course has a distance learning / online option for those who, for whatever reason, cannot make the face-to-face lecture times and dates. There, as Rebecca's mentioned, many reasons. I mean, they could also be, say, for international students, a time zone issue. So at least they can still study anywhere in the world, but time is not an issue.
Absolutely. So I'm just conscious of time. We've obviously been short for time on today's session, and we did promise a few minutes for questions. So I'm going to have to end the discussion now, I'm afraid. But it's been incredibly insightful and just really brilliant from the three of you. So thank you so much for your contributions there. And what I'll do is I'll open that up to questions. So if anybody has any questions, you can pop them into the chat box now for us to answer. We'll have a minute or so of responding to any queries, but of course you can get in touch after today's session as well, so no pressure to ask them live now. So I'll see if there's anything coming through. This is reliant on fast typing though, which is always So, we've got some feedback. Really good to have a student's viewpoint, which is brilliant. And it does look like we've got a question. So, do you think any assessment centres will move to purely remote? Do you think that would be an option for sort of moving forward and supporting students that way?
Personally, I think not, because there are some students who, because of various needs, would still need face-to-face. We have had some where the remote has been difficult, and it's doable, but it would be a lot easier, more efficient and more beneficial for the students if we had face-to-face.
Absolutely. Certainly a hybrid role, I think, is something that would be preferred and really beneficial for students in that sort of full support. Yeah. Okay, brilliant. So yeah, as I said, we are very short on time. So if anyone does have any questions and just wants to sort of email them through or let us know post today's session, then please do get in touch. What we have discussed today, obviously, is looking back over the last 12 months and looking at the challenges that we've all faced and really the importance of supporting the transition back into a normal world and supporting all of those communication challenges as well. Now, I'm rather biased, but there is a brilliant product called PresentPal, of course, that can support in building confidence for users, but improving communication skills as well. So what I'm going to do now is hand over to my colleague Amir Latif, who's going to give a very quick demonstration and run through of what PresentPal can offer. So over to you, Amir.
Thanks, Hannah. So I'm assuming you also have the control of the slide. So if you bear with me, I will be saying next slide, Hannah. So as Hannah said correctly here, this is going to be a glimpse into the new app, what new features we put in, not necessarily a full training session. For that, I would recommend definitely booking a session with Hannah so she can give you a full proper training session and do it justice in the sense of really learning how to use it and what are the pure benefits of this. So what you see on your screen is the aesthetic version of what the improvements are. So you can, for those who've seen the old app, clearly from that standpoint, you can see the difference right away. Still works on all smartphones and tablets, so Android and iOS devices. But what I'm going to focus on is really just the changes. So not how the tool works or anything like that. This is just going to be on the changes. So if we go to the next slide, Hannah. So the things that we're looking at, what's new since probably the last time you've seen this, we've made improvements to the rehearsal mode. There's ways that you're able to track your improvements, and that really focused in on the scaffolding approach towards improving confidence and reducing anxiety. And you'll see a little bit of that. We've also made it more accessible. We enhanced the accessibility features. The development team really worked hard because it's something we're all passionate about at PresentPal in terms of accessibility. So if we go on to the next slide. So let's talk about what the, slide before, sorry, we skipped a slide here. So the accessibility features, what we've done. So first thing, portrait mode, you can now use it on landscape and portrait mode. We've also made some visual setting improvements. So for those users or students who prefer the dark mode for visual preferences, that's now available. You can also set up your settings to display it in any font you want, so Open Dyslexic or any font size. And we've increased some color overlays, so some options here too. Additional things we've added in, there's an accessible scroll. That's really useful for students who may have muscle dexterity issues or prefer not to use hand swipe gestures to go up or down on the notes. That way you can use the accessible scroll, that's there. Other things that existed before are still in here, such as the text-to-speech, which a lot of people I know really liked in terms of the audio cues. And the app also uses the inherent speech-to-text element too of your smartphone. So accessibility is really, put it this way, we've kind of pumped it with steroids in terms of getting accessibility up here. So moving on to the next slide. This is the one that I think we got really excited about in terms of the improvements we've made, not just from aesthetic, but functionality-wise also. So what users can do now is when they turn on rehearsal mode, the software records their audio. As they're recording the audio, it's doing so for each flashcard. So when they go to listen back to each flashcard, they can then assess themselves and grade themselves on various different categories. So things such as speech, timing, content, variety of different content there. And they can say, look, thumbs up, or I need to improve on certain elements of there. And what it does then, it visualizes this as graphs and charts for the user to then see their progress. So for example, let's say I've got 5 flashcards. I've done really well in flashcard 1, 2, and 3, but flashcard 4, I need to improve my timing, so I can just keep track of that. And the idea being is getting to a point of where my confidence is really, really high in the content that I'm about to deliver. So this is really, really useful for students to actually self-assess themselves and actually monitor their improvements too. So if we move on to the next slide. Additional things we've added, this is a nice little add-on feature. I've always clarified to people, you do not need PowerPoint to use PresentPal. It's a nice to have. And if you are using PowerPoint, what we've done is we've made your life a little bit easier, because now you can change the slides using the app. We've built an integration with PowerPoint. So you don't have to worry about pressing a clicker or a keyboard. You can literally swipe to flashcard number 2 and it'll change it to slide number 2. Oh, and there it is. So for those who were thinking is Google Slides coming? Yes, the dev team is working hard on getting that done next. So that's exactly what we're working on right now. So I know there's some preferences that some students may prefer using Google Slides. That's fine. So we've considered that too. So we're going to add that in too. Perfect. Final thing just want to touch on is how else can you use PresentPal? It does have multiple functionality, because what we're seeing some of the users do is not just use it for presentations, remote and in-person presentations, which is the primary purpose. What we're finding out is some students are also using it for, say, group work, which could be to improve executive functioning. So if they're involved in planning a project or do any sort of work like that, any planning work, they're involved in any group exercise, it's really helpful for that, for putting their thoughts through on flashcards. Exam prep is a very interesting one. So a lot of students are using this in the same way they used old-fashioned flashcards, where, if some of you may recall, you would write the questions in the front of the flashcard and the answers in the back. in the same way they're doing so by writing the questions as bullet points and the answers as safety nets, so that it remains hidden. And then when they go to rehearsal mode, they can practice that. Again, I've briefly glanced over this, all of these functions and everything else. Hannah is a great trainer, so as some of you have experienced, she will do it justice and give you a proper training on this. So do get in touch with her and you can arrange that. So I believe her contact details are there. So Hannah, I'll pass it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Amir. So yes, a very quick run through. We did have our V3 release about a month ago, or well, late March. So for those of you that haven't seen it, get in touch. You can scan the barcode that's on the screen currently to actually access my calendar and book in a time directly if you have any questions at all. We have been very short for time today, so I do apologise if we run over a minute or so. But what I'm going to do, just to make sure that we're sort of following up with everybody in a way that they want. I'm going to launch the final poll now, and it's just whether you'd be interested in any of the following. So we can set you up with a PresentPal license, we can arrange a one-to-one training, we can provide you with a recording of today's webinar, and of course more information on PresentPal and the additional uses that Amir has mentioned today. So pop in the information there. If you do want to follow up, we'll make sure that that's done, and I'll be in touch. And if you have any questions following today's session, or would just like to arrange a catch up to chat anything through, let me know, get in touch, and we can book in a convenient time. So we are at the end of the webinar. Again, I would like to thank so much our brilliant speakers today. It's been so wonderful to have your insights and your input today and have you join us. So thank you so much. We'll share the recording so that you've got that to pass on to any colleagues and peers as well. So I will close that off now today, guys. Thank you so much for attending. It's been brilliant to see you all. And as I said, please never hesitate to be in touch after today's session if we can help with anything else at all. Have a wonderful afternoon.